Welcome to another Mormon Truth video. You're getting it in the Dodger Game channel, although I'm not logged into that at this moment. The Mormon Truth video library. Up here we see, what do we got? We're on YouTube, What Mormons Believe. We've done a bunch of replies to Mormon Next Door on What Mormons Believe, and today we're getting into the three Mormons doing their Book of Mormon translation. They're going to tell us why it's really totally cool to use a brown stone to translate ancient records. So these two guys down here with the blue background just below Mormon Next Door Girl, that's who we're going to be looking at and see what they have to say and how much factual information they give us or what techniques they use. And we're going to take a look at what they have to say. Well, the guy on the left here, Kwaku, I believe is his name. His banter in the comments section with Mormon Informant, another Mormon Truther. So let's hit the YouTube search here. I'm going to hit this top one, LDS Gospel Topics Essays, 50 Problems with a Mormon Church. The reason I'm using that, gets a lot of mine on there, and I just want to put stuff from my channel on here. But the 50 Problems one, I have done a bunch of videos on because I got into the details of the 50 items stated here in Mormon Informant's video, where he very concisely mentioned about 50 things and that are challenges for people to be able to reconcile with the assertion that an all-knowing, unchanging, wise, and holy God guides the LDS Church. So he's got 50 items on there, and then I've gone into the detail in a bunch of my videos on these, documenting things out of the scriptures and using LDS.org. So these search terms work well for me because I've got so many things that have 50 problems with the Mormon Church on there. And although some of these don't mention that, does the Book of Mormon actually contradict the LDS scriptures and the Gospel Topics Essays? Because that one mentions it. Some of them do, some of them don't. But this is a great search term for the Dodger Game channel. Don't just put Dodger Game, you wind up looking at LA Dodgers. So anyway, let's take a look and see what these guys have got. I wanted to bring up Mormon Informant because he makes really good comments on the comment section. He is probably one of the most astute Mormon scholars. I don't know, who he really is. He uses this alias just like I do, but he seems like he's got the knowledge of Dan Fogel and spelled with a V. It's a German name, means bird. Dan Fogel and D. Michael Quinn and some others all rolled into one. And he uses factual information here, and then these guys, well, let's see what they have to say with his comments. See if they use what the Book of Mormon describes people doing when they say he was a man of many words and spoke much flattery unto the people. And let's see if that's what Kwaku does. Because it's hard to argue with facts. Probably one of mine up here is mentions how facts are issues for
We brought an expert on the Book of Mormon.
Boy, there is nobody who knows more about the Book of Mormon.
Like Hugh Diddley, Parley Pratt. No, we have Mr. Smoot with us.
In fact, Stephen wrote the Book of Mormon.
Yeah,
Shocking reveal.
Pseudonym is Mormon.
Origins of Book of Mormon revealed.
Moroni is on this show right now.
Yeah.
You're seeing an angel, folks.
Where are you from?
I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah originally. So I went to BYU, where I did my undergraduate in Ancient and Near Eastern Studies.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went up to Toronto, Canada, where I'm currently doing my master's degree in Near and Middle Eastern civilizations with a focus or a concentration in Egyptology.
Wait, why are you in Orem right now with your...
Because I'm back here working at Book of Mormon Central. In the
Book of
meantime,
Mormon Central.
yeah.
Got it. What is Book of Mormon Central?
Well, said very briefly,
Yeah.
Book of Mormon Central is your one-stop shop for Book of Mormon scholarship.
Okay.
So that includes both new scholarship that's being produced today, and that includes scholarship that is being collected, that's been done in the past, and being sort of collected and gathered into one big online archive and database that we've put together.
Okay, cool.
Hence, Book of Mormon Central.
Wow,
See how that works?
gosh.
Yeah.
Pulling from one of the articles on Book of Mormon Central, why was a stone used as an aid in translating the Book of Mormon? And I just want to preface this. I didn't know that this was controversial about the Seer Stones and the Brownstone. To me, this is just a part of
this is what you learn.
The translation process.
Yeah. Who knew it would be controversial? I mean, everybody uses a brown rock to translate ancient records, right? I mean, gee, isn't that normal? Okay, so what we've done so far, what have we done? We established some credibility for the guy in the middle. He's been to school, he's studying, Near Eastern studies, and he's going to work on Egyptology. So we must take him seriously. He's got serious credentials here. Does it apply to anything we're talking about? Now, Kwaku on the left tells us, sure, I always knew he used a brown rock as an aid in translating. What do you mean an aid? Joseph Smith knew nothing about Egyptian, okay, in translating. What is it we're told happened? And he acts like he knew this the whole time. You know what? I didn't know that. Did you know that? So what's Joseph Smith's history, and how does it relate to this? I suppose maybe I'll wait a moment to get into that too much. So what's happening here is these guys are trying to convince us to believe something that doesn't make sense. So they're going to try to gain credibility. They're going to try to appear just like us, or in some way believable. So they've got stuff in the background that's going to say, hey, I'm just like you, I'm a normal college guy. You got an acoustic guitar hanging in there, I got posters and so forth, which happen to include Joseph Smith, a depiction of his claim, or the claim that was later put in, written by Brother Murdoch, saying that Joseph, in the first person, as if he was Joseph Smith, which you may know as the Joseph Smith history, where he's got the 1820 vision with the Father and the Son appearing to him, the only one of the 9 versions of the first vision where there was God the Father in it, or that he's 14, I believe. So, and the other ones he might be 15, 16, or so forth, maybe even 17. Never is God the Father there, but they got that. So they've got subliminal things here in the picture. We've got, what else do we have? So first thing is they gave us the impression that this guy's got credentials, or we should believe him. He's talked about Near Eastern studies, focus on Egyptologies, getting a master's. He went to BYU. They've all got the church-approved missionary haircut and so forth. And then they tie that in with the Book of Mormon, because he's working with Book of Mormon Central, and it has to do with everything scholarly to do with the Book of Mormon. So he's maybe doing an internship, just came back from college, and that gives him some sort of credibility, you would think. Except for Egyptian, has nothing to do with using a brown rock, using magic and witchcraft to accomplish whatever it is you're doing. And in this case, channel from the spiritual world information to put to publish in the Book of Mormon, which he says has something to do with some gold plates that no one has ever seen, and which were not even in the room or in the house, according to his wife Emma, or David Whitmer. When he was at the Whitmer home doing this, apparently he was just supposedly seeing visions on a brown rock with a piece of parchment with English translation in the type of language that you would see in the King James Bible. In fact, word for word out of the King James Bible edition from the 1700s that the Smith family happened to have, including its mistranslations. So, and word for word stuff out of Isaiah in the Book of Mormon, and quotes out of the New Testament in the Book of Mormon, which apparently seem to be grammatically okay, whereas even after Joseph Smith says, Jesus is speaking through him, essentially, in Doctrine and Covenants section 1, saying the Book of Mormon is absolutely correct, and he said it was the most correct book on earth, and all those sort of things. There were nearly 4,000 corrections made, most of them grammatical, so Jesus apparently had difficulty taking the language from the Greek, the Egyptian or Reformed Egyptian that it claims it's on, into Elizabethan English, except for the parts that happen to be already in the Bible and match pretty much word for word. Then his English was great. So this guy's created some illusion of having something to do with this, but actually, if he had experience in witchcraft, in magic and high degree Freemasonry, maybe he was a 33rd degree Scottish Rite, but he's a little too young for that, no doubt. So those would actually relate to practicing magic, channeling, but that's
and they use the words as an aid in translating, as if he was translating something, like studying it out, and then God's just helping him. The God, from the Hebrew Bible, basically. Okay, so what else do we have? So we got things that say, hey, I'm kind of like you. Also, they're representing various possible aspects of society, yet being conforming to what the prophet says that they, demands for you to, be a missionary for the church. The grooming standards that they call them. In other words, losing your identity and having a haircut that makes you like a robot. You got to look just like they say. If you're a guy that doesn't want your hair looking like that, well, too bad. You have to look just like this. You got the guy in the middle. He's wearing a purple shirt, lavender. If it was lavender or pink, or maybe if he had lavender and pink, that'd be telling us something, wouldn't it? So they're giving us the option to think that this guy might be, gay, but controlling himself between two other dudes here, and he's a guy that's just representing an aspect of society where he's not letting that take over his life, but he might just feel a little bit that way. Maybe I'm reading that in too much, huh? The guy on the left happens to be black, of African descent, it appears, which is something the church would like to portray as normal and popular. However, demographically, you're not going to have 33% of the church being black, especially from the United States. Maybe less than half of a percent or something is what I would speculate. Haven't checked that, but the demographics I've seen at church over the years in many places would not be represented by 33% African descent. So these are impressions that are being given to our minds. So we got the Joseph Smith in the Grove depiction, with the Father and the Son version of the vision. Nine versions, and the one that the Father and the Son are in, the one that they chose to represent the official version, because no one ever heard of such a thing. None of his family ever heard of it. You can watch my First Vision videos and see the documentation on them and all that. The story that's been fabricated here for us is far from what the historical record shows us. So these are techniques being used to make them look believable. They try to sound like, everything is spontaneous rather than scripted, and everything's cool. Maybe it's spontaneous. I really don't think so. And they got fishbowl on here. They got a goldfish. They got a little elephant toy. Everything to just say, hey, we're just normal. And so Kwaku, guy on the left, says, hey. Oh, I thought it was just normal people got, revelations off of broad rocks. I was brought up, something else, and I was converted to the church. Oh, so is that trying to tell us that the missionaries tell you that? Because they sure as heck don't. Unless that just started happening, very, very recently, because I'm sure not aware of it. Not something they told me, not something anybody in church ever told me, not something ever I learned in gospel doctrine class. No. It may have been normal enough back in the day for people who were into magic. Joseph F. Smith, I believe, affirmed that same story, but hasn't been taught in a long time. We're supposed to believe it's magic glasses, because that just sounds a little better. But even they try to avoid discussing that because it's a little too weird. So they say by the gift and power of God. But if we read that Joseph Smith wrote these things into the Book of Mormon, the magic glasses, the magic Seer Stone, and the magic stones that light up, for Jaredite barges, there's all kinds of stuff, and then you're called seer if you use them. Just like in Joseph Smith's neighborhood. Like various other seers, including himself. Just a coincidence that all this 19th century stuff is being written into the Book of Mormon. They're all about normalizing it for us. Making it seem like it's okay to believe it. Consciously and subconsciously through subliminal things that they've got there. So they're doing a lot of things to gain credibility, believability. Just like using photographs or what appear to be photographs, paintings, depictions of things that are not real. They'll blend the real with the not real. The real is rock. The rock is real. Excuse me. Does it show visions on it? I really don't think so. Crystal ball is a lot more believable. It still takes something from the spiritual world, but these things are all condemned supposedly by the Hebrew God, right? This is all magic.
He's using a brown stone to translate the Book of Mormon. Where in the world did he get that? What we've been told in the Book of Mormon is that there were two clear stones set like in a silver bow or something. I probably ought to just go ahead and reference Ether chapter 3 on that. It's near the end, near verse 25 or 28, something like that. And it says they're prepared as interpreters. Then later in Alma, and the guy in the middle is going to reference that, he's going to talk about a stone being prepared so that I don't know who, it's probably Mosiah, can discover the wickedness of the people by looking into a stone. Basically, this is like using a crystal ball. Crystal balls, divining rods, dark mirrors, Ouija boards, and seer stones are all magical implements used in practicing magic or witchcraft. And these guys are going to try to make it seem totally normal. So let's pay attention to the psychology that's being used here. Okay? Joseph Smith started using a seer stone long before he said he discovered or was told where these plates were. So pay attention to the interesting coincidences in the Joseph Smith story. A guy practicing magic is called of God, and Moroni takes away the magic glasses that were written into the Book of Mormon and recovered by Joseph in the box, along with other things, as the story goes. So they're taken out of the story. But then the angel takes them away, so he uses the brown stone that he's been using previous to that, searching for treasure and other things. All right, let's get back to these guys. See how they normalize everything for us. Hey, magic is totally normal for doing the work of the Hebrew God. And they'll show us how.
In my shoes, growing up in the church, there's lots of artwork of Joseph Smith, translating the Book of Mormon with the plates, and there's people there looking at it and all this stuff. And so lots of people, like myself, grew up with this lens of artwork related to the gospel doctrine that was in my head. And so when I found out that it wasn't exactly how the artwork was depicting it, it kind of also threw me for a loop.
Yeah, and one thing we discussed in the article is the difference between sort of artistic depictions of something versus the accurate historical information. So artists, of course, aren't necessarily sticklers for historical accuracy when they make their art.
Except for you, Anthony Sweat.
Yeah,
Appreciate
shout
it.
out to Anthony Sweat. We quote him in the article. He's really great. And we use his artwork a lot, too.
Yeah, thank you,
check him
Professor
out.
Sweat, for passing me in your DNC1. You really didn't have to. I didn't do that good of a job. But you, sir...
Okay, so they got some banter on there, and they just sound and look like total hipsters, so we should believe them, right? But so what does he say? What does he say there? Again, normalizing it. Now, the guy on the right, as we look at him, he says, well, he didn't grow up learning about a seer stone. Well, are the missionaries talking about a seer stone now in a hat? Would they show art? And he says, well, this is what we got. And then the guy in the center tells us, well, yeah, but, artists, they're not always accurate. Well, the fact is that the art that you would have seen in the ensign probably most of your life was what they were showing. So if it's not accurate, if it's giving us a false story, why is the church publishing that? Those articles are approved by the First Presidency. So if they include artwork that depicts something that is known to be not true, why are they using it? Because it goes into our mind as evidence. Subliminally, we get the message, this is true because we've seen it. Just like when they show us the pictures of the magic glasses, which they later, because of Oliver Cowdery, called Urim Thummim, which has Urim Thummim in the Old Testament has got nothing to do with magic glasses. Okay? But Joseph Smith writes in 19th century magic into the Book of Mormon is what it kind of looks like. It just happens to be there. Now, it's just a coincidence. Okay? All right, so they do show art of somebody looking at a stone in a hat, but was that what you grew up looking at in the ensign? So whoever published the ensign was publishing something that they knew was portraying something that was not true. It makes it look like he's studying the plates, like he's like some kind of a, an Egyptologist or something. So it's portraying a false idea, but these guys are normalizing everything for us.
So it really did help me out.
Anyways,
Yeah, so back to stones, yeah? You're totally right. For a lot of people, the idea of seer stones is unknown or, foreign or even weird to them, right?
well, people know about the Urim Thummim.
Right,
They
yeah.
believe that they were like these white stones or something.
Set in the bow.
Right, set
yeah.
in the bow, and there's like a breastplate, and there's all of these instruments to translate, right?
Yeah, one thing you always have to keep in mind is these historical issues can become very murky when you're
Right.
trying to break down the different sources and what they're saying. Take, for example...
Yeah, it get pretty murky. That was an artist's depiction of them because no one's ever seen them. They disappeared, just like the plates. Now, the brown stone didn't, that Joseph Smith used previous to finding the Book of Mormon, as he claims, because it was, something he found. People saw it. People saw him using it in the hat to search for treasure, using it to search for other things, and using it to, I don't really want to say translate the Book of Mormon, because there's nothing to translate. There wasn't anything there. According to Emma, he was sitting next to her, looking in his hat, and there weren't any plates there. Supposedly they were hiding in a hollow log or something when he was using the Seer Stone. They just weren't there. So that's not translating, that's channeling. That's seeing a vision on like a crystal ball, if he was, in fact, seeing anything there. So, okay, let's keep going. Now these guys will just make it totally normal. Everybody looks at a rock when they want to have a vision, especially a brown one.
Example, the issue of what do they call these instruments? We call them the Urim Thummim, but the historical sources call them all sorts of things. They refer, and they sometimes refer to them interchangeably, right? They'll use the same terms to refer to different sets of instruments. So it takes a lot of work to sort of break down what's going on historically to make sense of what stones are being used and when they were being used and in what capacity they were being used. And that can be off-putting for a lot of people who just don't want to really jump into it that intensely.
I think some people might see it this way, like you could be saying in 21st century verbiage, oh, he was using a smartphone. But if we're going to go into it, it's like, oh, was it an iOS or was it an Android? Like this idea of people not exactly using the correct term. I think people are a little bit too picky.
Speaking of seer stones, I have my white seer stone here, right, that I'm going to read some of the Book of Mormon off of. It's in Alma 37 is where we actually get this interesting reference.
Why don't we clear the issue up instead of trying to confuse it? It appears these guys are actually trying to confuse the issue here when they say, oh, in the historical context, people are using different words for them, interpreters, Seer Stone, Urim Thummim, and so on and so forth. Well, as we see, nowhere in the LDS canon of Scripture are seer stones called Urim and Thummim, until we get to section 130 in the Doctrine and Covenants, when Joseph Smith says that the white stone in the book of Revelation is a Urim and Thummim that people will be given. Other than that, at this time, as far as the Book of Mormon is concerned, there's no mention of it. Joseph Smith wrote into the Book of Mormon interpreters, and that whoever used these two stones, which he called interpreters, set in two rims of a silver bow, that person was called a seer. He also put in the Book of Mormon where that one stone that was prepared for Gazelum and was shining forth to reveal things like a crystal ball. The term Urim and Thummim got brought in by Oliver Cowdery, trying to connect it to the breastplate of Laban, where two stones along with 12 other stones, which were like precious stones, which I'm sure the Israelites just had in the desert or wilderness walking around. They had, diamonds and all these various different precious gems that were used to decorate the garments, or that Aaron was to wear into the Holy of Holies there in the traveling tabernacle. They were. And two of the stones, I think the Urim and Thummim, each had 6 names engraved on them of the tribes of Israel. Had nothing to do with glasses, and I think they said they were made of onyx, which is black. So, 0 to do with being seer stones. Nothing at all to do with that 19th century magic that was written into the Book of Mormon, and then extracted as the means of interpreting the ancient language, apparently. So, there we have it. These guys try to liken it to different types of cell phones. An iPhone versus a smartphone is a brown rock versus 2 clear stones set in a silver bow, which both appear to come out of Joseph Smith's own vivid imagination, unless we have some record of, well, actually, seer stones were being used. As we know, Joseph and his neighbors were using them. But they were very much like crystal balls, apparently, except they don't make a lot of sense when they're brown, to me.
maybe to somebody, but not to me.
Yeah, so his digital Seer Stone there actually has a chipset in it and all sorts of technology. There are reasons why he's able to see things on it. You know, cell phone towers are broadcasting things, and that is an instrument designed to reinterpret that. A brown rock, well, the technology there, it doesn't have very many moving parts, we can say that, unless you throw it. So we're comparing a brown rock to a smartphone. That's a pretty big stretch, don't we think? But they're normalizing it in our minds here. So now he's going to use his digital Seer Stone and read us a scripture from Alma about a Seer Stone in the Book of Mormon.
Here I'll read the verse. This is verse 23. And the Lord said, I will prepare unto my servant Gazalim a stone, which shall shine forth in darkness unto light, that I may discover unto my people who serve me, that I may discover unto them the works of their brethren, yea, their secret works, their works of darkness, and their wickedness and abominations. So the first part of that verse, Gazalim, right? There's a big question. Is this the servant or is it the stone?
Yeah.
Because the way it's punctuated, it's...
You know, are we obfuscating? Are we changing the subject? Does that matter at all? Is he calling Joseph Smith or Mosiah Gazalim, or is he calling the rock Gazalim? Well, I think that we've got something in Doctrine and Covenants where Joseph Smith gets called Gazalim, supposedly by the Lord. But the point is, there's a stone that's going to shine. It's going to be a seer stone. It's going to be what the magicians in the 19th century were using as, you know, pocket-sized crystal ball alternates to discover the wickedness of his brethren, is what he just read, is it not? You can look it up in your Book of Alma again yourselves later. So that was the purpose that it was for there, to use like a crystal ball to see what people were doing, is what we just heard him say from Alma. Once again, Ether chapter 3, right near the end of the chapter, it mentions something that I would just call magic spectacles, magic glasses. It doesn't use the word magic, it says interpreters. And then whosoever uses them is called a seer, which is interesting since Joseph Smith was called a seer. People in his day, magicians that were using these types of implements, were called seers or scryers or crystal gazers. And in the court appearance in 1826, when Josiah Stoll's relatives took Joseph to court for fraud, is what it sounds like, because he was functioning as the seer for Josiah Stoll. I think he was getting paid, like $14 an hour, or not an hour, excuse me, like a month, inflation, back then. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm pretty sure it was a lot better than you get for manual labor, and it was certainly a lot easier. So they were looking for various things, like maybe a silver mine he thought was on his property, but they never recovered anything of value. So Joseph was getting this money, and if it was minimum wage, I don't think the nephews of Josiah Stoll would have been taking Joseph Smith to court over it. So in that case, 1826, 6 years after he would have had the vision, but he hadn't reported such a thing yet, he's using magic. He's using a magical stone to search for treasure. And they called him a crystal gazer, I believe, in that case. He was referred to as doing such things. Josiah Stoll seemed to think he was a fine crystal gazer. Thought they found some things, but they could just never get it because the spirits would take it deeper into the earth. So he was a big Joseph Smith fan. You notice he didn't take him to court. It was his relatives that thought he was being, duped by Joseph Smith. So here we go. Let's continue this. We're using basically an alternative device to a crystal ball. A prophet of the God of Israel is using an alternative tool to a crystal ball, and one that appears to me, looking at it, to make less sense. It's easier for me to visualizing in a crystal ball. How about you? Or the dark mirror technique? Not that I want to teach magic, not that I know it, I have seen a few things. Let's take a little closer look at this business with seer stones and the like. First mention of seer that we have in LDS scripture, other than it being a seer being synonymous with a prophet, Essentially, in the Old Testament, we have Moses chapter 7. Enoch is told to anoint his eyes with clay, and then he can see things invisible to the natural eye. Okay, now here we are in Ether chapter 3. Brother Jared is talking to the Lord and has seen him face to face in this interview, and he's told to write the things he's seen, but to do it in a language that will be confounded. So it says, "And behold, these 2 stones will I give unto thee, and ye shall seal them up also with the things." Okay? For behold, the language is confounded, is what it's going to go on to say. And here again, we've got, "And it came to pass that the Lord commanded him that he should seal up the 2 stones which he had received, and show them not until the Lord should show them." Okay, real good. Now, there's Mosiah chapter 8, Mosiah chapter 28, and then the other reference in Alma chapter 37. Once again here, so it's talking about Mosiah interpreting the language of the Jaredite record with those same 2 stones that it just mentioned. So there's the 24 plates, and he's able to use these interpreters in order to read them. Here we've got the Alma 37, which is different. It's not 2 stones, it's 1. It says, "And the Lord said, I will prepare unto my servant Gazelem a stone which shall shine forth in darkness unto light, that I may discover unto my people various things." Okay, probably should have said reveal, but that's what it said. So a stone that shines, like the stone in the hat that Joseph had been using. But that's the only reference like that. The rest of them, it goes on to call these things interpreters. Even in that same chapter, it mentions interpreters. "And now, my son, these interpreters were prepared that the word of God might be fulfilled, which he spake, saying, I'll, show forth what the wicked people did. And now, my son," all right, here we go, the same thing. And then later it says, after it says, I'm going to reveal all their wickedness and secret acts, then he says, don't do that, to his son Helaman, this Alma talking to Helaman in that case. So, multiple places here, they're called interpreters, and they are 2 stones. And here we've got 2 stones set in a silver bow. Okay. And whoso has these things is called seer, after the manner of old times, it says. And after Mosiah had finished translating these records, behold, it gave an account of people who were destroyed from the time of the Tower of Babel, etc. So there we have it. 2 clear stones set in a silver bow. Here we go. "And now he translated them by means of those 2 stones which were fastened into the 2 rims of a bow. Now these things were prepared from the beginning and were handed down from generation to generation for the purpose of interpreting languages." And so these are in the Joseph Smith story, apparently Moroni takes these away from him, and so he goes back to his regular brown stone to translate. Why would an angel of God take away the interpreters that have been prepared from the beginning to translate and have him go back to his other magical practice, which seems to be forbidden, especially specifically in Isaiah? Figure that one out. Okay. Just wanted to shine the light on that one, especially since we were only told about the single seer stone when the expert from when the three self-proclaimed experts, one of them making Middle Eastern studies, which has nothing to do with studying witchcraft and the works of magic, told us only about the one stone when it's only mentioned once and these other ones are mentioned multiple times. I guess that's their agenda.
Somewhat ambiguous.
Gazlam, stone?
comma, a stone, comma, which is my servant, right? So
Yeah,
it's
it could be a
ambiguous.
presentation of a stone, or it could be Gazlam, and then this is the description, a stone.
Yeah, stone. But what's really significant, I think, here is this idea that whatever is going on with all this, the Lord is behind it.
Yeah.
This is a divine, miraculous work that's being accomplished, right? This isn't just Joseph Smith doing his crazy folk magic stuff like a lot of people maybe assumed he was doing. No, this was...
Okay, it's crazy folk magic when he's using the Seer Stone to search for somebody's lost chicken, or to search for treasure in the earth for Josiah Stowell, when he was the seer for that, or when he and his father and maybe some of his brothers were out doing this, treasure seeking at night and sacrificing black animals to appease the guardian spirits and all sorts of necromancy like that, for which he got kicked out of the Methodist Sunday School in 1828, according to their records. And it was relatives of Joseph Smith that instigated getting him kicked out of the Methodist Sunday School. Perhaps you didn't know he was in the Methodist Sunday School. He was not baptized as a Methodist, but he tried to join their Sunday school and was shortly thereafter kicked out. And according to the documents, which I've got in one of my videos on magic and Mormonism and Joseph and the Seer Stones and so forth in the Dodger Game channel, the documents there say that these people that they talk about, they say, they had witnesses of who went to kick him out, so they had, verifiable grounds, because they thought it was a disgrace to the church to have a practicing necromancer in their Sunday school organization. And talked about, bleeding ghosts and so forth, all the things that Joseph Smith was associated with the necromancy. And just what you'd expect a prophet of the God of Israel to be doing after God has supposedly visited him in New York. It's just that he never told anybody that at that time. We didn't get that till 1838. Actually, it wasn't even published till 1842, and he's not even the one who wrote it, but he had time to edit it. Yeah, it was it Murdoch that wrote that? That's documented in one of my first Vision videos, where we go over the historical issues very carefully and document things. So it's there. Let's continue.
Joseph was being divinely prepared and tutored to use these instruments in a miraculous way.
Right.
And that's why Joseph Smith could say it was accomplished by the gift and power of God.
He was being tutored. How was he being tutored? He was being tutored by practicing magic, and then God just took his abilities that somehow he was being tutored in. Who? By the local scryer? Yeah, there was a local guy teaching him. But was that God behind that to teach him how to use a seer stone? Use magic, which is condemned in the Bible. Let's just mention this really quickly. In the book of Isaiah, it condemns wizards who peep and mutter. Seer stones were also called peep stones, very interestingly. And if your face is in a hat blocking out the light, if you don't come up for air, I suppose it would sound like you're muttering. That's in Isaiah, and ironically, it's one of the things that found its way into the Book of Mormon from Isaiah. According to the Book of Mormon, that came from plates of brass, the hard copy that Laban had, that he lost his head over with Nephi, and Nephi took to the Promised Land, and then transcribed into Reformed Egyptian, and then it comes out, thanks to Joseph Seer Stone activities, into word for word with the King James version of the Bible. We're very close there too, without the terrible grammatical problems that seem to plague other portions of the Book of Mormon that didn't come word for word out of the Bible. Just a coincidence. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so, here's the other thing. Besides just Joseph Smith, we have other prophets in the Bible and other scripture that used instruments to accomplish God's work. Think of Moses using his staff when he was in the court of the Egyptians. Think of the Ark of the Covenant, which the Israelites literally hauled around with them from place to place, where they kept the Ten Commandments, the tablets of the Ten Commandments, and so forth. Even think of in the New Testament, you have Jesus who performs miracles by spitting into clay and anointing people's eyes with it, right?
Even Harrison Ford in Raiders of the Lost Ark used
Even he uses.
He even uses the Ark of the Covenant, so don't act like this isn't secular.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, so look, this basically the.
Use an Indiana Jones to back up your religion, huh?
Yeah, that's the way to go. Absolutely. But yeah,
Steven Spielberg's a closet Mormon. We all know it.
No, but so, for people who believe in God, people who are part of the Judeo-Christian tradition, this shouldn't be this crazy. The idea that God would prepare some kind of instruments. The Book of Mormon calls them means. Right. God would prepare means to accomplish his work. And from a perspective of faith, we can see this happening with Joseph Smith utilizing these stones to translate the book.
One of the strangest things that I feel we as Latter-day Saints get attacked for and get distance from the rest of the Christian community is, some of the more... Let's just take the stones, right? Yeah. To a lot of people, though, that's so weird. Stones being used to translate ancient records? Sir, you believe in a talking snake. We cannot rule out miracles and strange things in Christianity and in theology. You can't say, oh, that's crazy, but this is crazy.
And not just a talking snake, but a talking donkey.
A talking donkey.
That's in the Bible.
A talking ass.
Yeah.
It's rather amazing if you understand some of the things that these guys are doing. I don't know if somebody's writing script for them, but there's so much salesmanship, so many like semi-subliminal psychological techniques being used here to introduce ideas into your mind, and part of it's woven into the Book of Mormon story. Here are a couple of quick examples. So they just really quickly, even though when the Kwaku says he got passed, maybe undeservedly or something from Doctrine and Covenants course 1, with Institute or something. And then the guy interrupts and said, oh, that was grace. And so it just takes a second to go in there, but that's dropping in the hint, hey, we're like you. We are like you evangelical Christians. We are like Christians. We believe in grace like they do. And that, so that's just slipping something in there. Now, as far as Book of Mormon theme, weaving something that appears to be real or that many people accept as real from the Bible. So many people just accept the Bible as real and they haven't thought about, hey, what's the historicity of that? Just because Jerusalem exists, does that mean everything happened there? The breastplate of Aaron, is said to have stones on it. 2 of those stones are called named Urim and Thummim. I think there were a total of 12, like representing the 12 tribes of Israel or something. So this is a breastplate that he wears. I don't know, it's like a radiation protection or something that somebody uses that's into radiology. When he walks into this place, the Holy of Holies, maybe there's heavy radiation coming from some kind of, I can just see this on, on the History Channel on the Ancient Aliens thing. They were getting transmissions from somewhere and it radiated, so Aaron needed this breastplate, right? So anyway, it talks about the Urim and Thummim being attached to that. So these are just a couple of the stones that are on or ornamenting or of some value on this breastplate that Aaron uses walking into the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle for the Israelites. Then they tie that into the breastplate of Laban, which is supposedly one of the relics that was in this stone box. Pretty big box, huh? A breastplate in it, plus Urim and Thummim. There was no Urim and Thummim mentioned in there. Nothing in the Book of Mormon says Urim and Thummim. Oliver Cowdery made that up, or tied that in with the Bible. Urim and Thummim was not part of the Book of Mormon. What's part of the Book of Mormon were basically magic spectacles, and then he also, and Joseph Smith describes 2 clear stones set in a silver bow. And that's very similar to the description in Ether chapter 3, whereas the description in Alma mentions a stone that shines, like a seer stone, which is like maybe the Ether chapter 3 stones that were touched to create light in the barges, as they were called. Different stones from the ones that were, clear stones making up by magic glasses, even though the other ones were clear. So this other... We're taking things from the Book of Mormon. We're taking magic glasses, and now we're attaching them to Aaron's breastplate from the Bible, which more people believe is, something that they think is factual. So there's the perception of reality, we've got something from Joseph's book tying into the Bible artificially, and then these guys are acting like he possessed that, and then someone's got a picture, a painting that they've created, an artist's depiction of this. those things weren't even in the Book of Mormon. The spectacles were not attached to Aaron's breastplate. They were given in Ether chapter 3 to Ether so that someone could put on magic glasses and translate an unknown language into something that they could understand. But they just slipped that in. So we've got non-reality into another, or something that is perceived as reality to many in the Bible, put into the Book of Mormon, and then put into the present day for Joseph Smith, and something that somebody never saw. Isn't that... That's pretty slick. They use so many ways of creating the illusion that something is real that is not. Unless you believe Joseph Smith's story there, but that isn't even part of the Book of Mormon. They've just created something, and, you know, they've created something new here. Inventing history. So, and passing it off using psychological techniques to present it to your mind as evidence. I have a hard time believing that these guys are doing this on their own.
I think the key scripture is Doctrine and Covenants, section 88, verses 118, which says, "And as all have not faith, seek ye diligently, and teach one another words of wisdom. Yea, seek ye out of the best books words of wisdom. Seek learning even by study and also by faith." So even when we have these commandments to study history and geography and languages and so forth, the component there is faith, by study and also by faith. And so, yeah, we hope that, people won't sort of like base their testimony on this evidence per se. Of course, ultimately it is the Spirit that witnesses of the truth of the Book of Mormon, and that's what's key.
So make sure you...
Another technique that is used is to take something from fiction, take something out of a storybook, which could include, anything from Harry Potter to Genesis to the Book of Mormon, and then turn that into fact for us and make it real, just like doing it with pictures, creating a picture of, Moroni, alone in a bedroom with Joseph Smith talking to him, when in fact, he had, 4 brothers with him and there were only 2 beds. But what's depicted in popular church art, which they'll put in the ensign, knowing that it was not possibly true. I mean, there's no possibility of it being true. Show him in a room with like it's his own private suite there, right? With like what they had around 9 children or something, a little 3-bedroom cabin. So it goes straight into your brain, into your mind, subconscious, as if it's real, but it's a painting. And now you can do things with Photoshop. So, like calling the Bible fact, something. Establishing something, and you talk about it for a moment, and then you decided it's fact, and then from there you use it to prove something in the real world. But in fact, it isn't fact. It's something you took out of a storybook and pretend that it's real, and then you go that and you take that and use it to see creationists do it all the time. In their arguments, and they say, "Hey, look at this story proves that this is true." It's just a story at this point. You've done nothing to establish that there's anything factual about it. Just because it said, Daniel wasn't eaten in the lion's den story, does that mean it's true? Does Moses parted the Red Sea? Is it true? What, because you feel good about it? And if you read the book of Genesis or, the various books of Moses, you'll find anachronisms showing that, they got, Abraham going to a city that didn't exist, until long after he would have been dead or something. There are all sorts of things that show that it couldn't have been written by Moses, or, because it'll show evidence that it had to have been written, 800 BC or something, not 1300. So, all sorts of things. But once they get in your mind that something like, oh, here's the Urim Thummim, and they show you a painting of it, and oh, that makes it real because there's like a picture of it. It doesn't make it real. No one ever saw something like that. They saw this brown rock. They didn't see magic glasses. They didn't see golden plates. The guys, that they didn't sign a statement. Oliver Cowdery signed it for everybody. And then people questioned, said, well, I saw it with their spiritual eyes. They visualized it. So people pick them up, heft them. Really? Yeah. They what did they heft? Nothing that they saw. There was something under a cloth. A few of them hefted, said it was about 40 pounds. It would have been 200 or so if it was, golden plates. Because of the weight of gold. No one ever had the opportunity to correlate. To see them and heft them, no.
You can heft them, but you can't see them. You can visualize them, but yeah. Okay, so taking things from imagination or things that are not provable in the physical world, and then pretending they are fact in order to correlate that with something in the physical world. Crafty technique. It's used all the time. Watch for it.
Why not? So let's bust into their video here. And Kale, here we go. Mormon Informant's got something to say. And what is it? He starts it off, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. First problem is that he used the same stone in hat method to translate as he did when, later on, when he was doing his money digging. Now, it's good to note here, however, that there are plenty of documentations to this. Nevertheless, in the Joseph Smith history that we find in the Pearl of Great Prize, he basically denies that. He tries not to mention it. He just says, just because I was digging or working for Josiah Stoll, I think he actually says he was digging. He was the seer, not the digger. They had other people that they didn't have. Josiah Stoll didn't come 150 miles to hire him to dig. Okay, they had plenty of people who could dig. Said he had a reputation as a seer. And he says, oh, it's because of that they call me a money digger. It's these prevalent stories. He basically denies it. Just like he said his family was, baptized in the Presbyterian Church prior to an 1820 rendition of the first vision. When it's pretty historically, shown that it was after Alvin died, which was 1823. Okay, so anyway, so what's this here? I just compliment him on his factual, scholarly statements there. He talks about the magical parchments and the, magical knife and all that kind of stuff. And so this guy's like, he's just trying to trash him using, okay, here's Kwaku. I thought they said it was Kwaku. I'm not trying to make fun of it. I'm just trying to read it. The Mormon Informant. He's addressing Kwaku's. He says, that was certainly a hefty characterization. There are many people who just think Joseph's a liar, but harnessing the powers of the occult? Okay, the Seer Stone's not the occult? Of course it is. You take it to a new level. Magic and enchantments, huh? Yes, he didn't take it there. It's well documented. By this logic, my patriarchal blessing says I'm Gandalf or something. Okay, so basically he uses mockery and so forth. And what does the Mormon Informant say? He says, I'm not making this stuff up. Joseph possessed a magic dagger as well as 2 parchments known as the Holiness to the Lord. Does that sound familiar? Holiness to the Lord. Ever see that on the temples? Parchment and the St. Peter bind them parchment. Both were decorated with symbols from the Book of Magus, as well as astrological symbols and words intended to bind or summon spirits. He also possessed a Jupiter talisman, which supposedly granted the wearer power. All items are still in possession of either the church or descendants of Hiram Smith. So, this is documented fact. Okay, and LDS historians have documented it very well. Bachman has, D. Michael Quinn has, and Richard Bachman is, in good standing. He's been like a patriarch, stake president, and basically he's had to admit this stuff was true. Lucy Mack talks about, the practice here of, the practicing the faculty of Abrac, and that's under the context of basically she's being interviewed, and they're saying, what's going on, you guys? We didn't spend all our time practicing magic. Sure, we practice magic, but only in our spare time. We did, we did other work too. I mean, that's the point of it, and if you read it, you can see that. So he documents this. Okay? So it's interesting you bring up patriarchal blessings. The Smiths also, they were soothsayers, and they were paid for that, and they continued that practice by, patriarchal blessings. He was making anywhere between $1 or $2 a pop of Joseph Smith Sr. Now let's put this into context. When the Saints moved into Kirtland, you could purchase about an acre of land for about $7. So how'd you like to be able to do a patriarchal blessing, 7 blessings, and own an acre of land free and clear? Sounds pretty good to me. So anyway, yeah, this soothsaying practice was continued basically, is what he's saying here, in the patriarchal blessings for charging for them. Of course, you probably maybe also don't know that, like, bishops used to get like 10% of whatever the take was on tithing, and stake presidents would get like 5% of whatever was taken for the whole stake. So 15% was being taken off the top. Yeah, that was discontinued.
You wonder where multi-level marketing came from?
Early 1900s.
Why it's so big in Utah?
Sure
There
exactly
you go,
when,
right there.
That's pretty well documented. So much for non-paid clergy. Now it just all goes to the guys at the top, I suppose, and whoever's stockholders and various corporations and holding companies for the church. But they don't pay the bishops anymore. Mission presidents get I don't know exactly what they get, but I read, it could be pretty good. Hit them up for a new Lexus and send your kids to college for free or whatever. All right. So Kwaku just attacks him again. Mormon Informant. I like Bushman's work, but I disagree with him. Oh, I think I skipped one there. Mormon Informant. When I read that, it sounds like she's referencing the occupation of drawing magic circles. It sounds like a denial. Well, it's not a denial. Read it yourself. I've read it. She's not denying it. She's denying that it took all of their time. She acknowledges it. It's like Ike Turner when he says, "Sure, I beat Tina, but only when she deserved it." Sure, we practice magic, but only in our spare time. Only all night long, and then, who knows. Ridiculous. All the guy does is name call here. Well, Mormon Informant. Okay, so now he discredits Bushman. Bushman's considered extremely credible. Okay. I don't have to agree with him on everything. Your opinion on church history is skewed. It's not an opinion. He stated verifiable facts. However, if you do, why don't you read Peter Pan? Okay? He does nothing to refute anything with fact. So, Mormon Informant informs him as to what a fact is. A fact is a statement that can be proven true or false. An opinion is an expression of a person's feeling that cannot be proven. It can be proven that these items were in possession of the Smith family. So it is a fact, not an opinion. 2, you don't have to, but you'd be foolish not to. 3, I would have expected a better answer from you. Richard Bushman, for example, acknowledges the folk magic, but claims it was preparatory to Joseph's prophetic mission. That sounds like what these guys were saying. Didn't they say God was preparing him to use a Seer Stone? Okay, so that's an opinion and a twist Richard Bushman gives. So he acknowledges it. He was using a Seer Stone, and Richard Bushman says God was preparing him by being a magician, which the Bible condemns as heresy, but claims it was preparatory to Joseph's prophetic mission. I don't agree with him there either, but it's a better answer than denying and the mockery. Typical kind of thing we get when they don't want to deal with facts. They just start calling names or telling you you're nuts and you should be on medication or all sorts of things. You're a liar, an apostate, and then this always got his facts being put up by Mormon Informant. Once again, I have stated nothing but factual claims. They are either true or false. Therefore lie outside the realm of opinion. Once again, you resort to a straw man and ad hominem attacks rather than addressing the claim I am making. I don't claim to believe in magic, and I am not asking you to. I am demonstrating that Joseph Smith either believed in magic or that he took advantage of the gullible who did. In other words, it's factual that they were involved in the treasure digging things. That's how Joseph met Emma when he was staying at the home of the Hales. Her father, Isaac Hale, was involved in the treasure digging expedition for Josiah Stoll, and certain people, including Joseph, boarded at his home, and he wound up eloping with the guy's daughter because Isaac Hale wasn't that impressed with Joseph Smith and his scrying, his seer stoning, him being a seer. So we've got Joseph Smith as a seer growing up, and then he writes seer into the Book of Moses and into the Book of Mormon. We don't see a problem there. And he's a seer because he has a seer stone and he's practicing magic. And that's just totally cool, right? It's like having an iPhone. Okay, Lucy Mack said that Josiah Stowell came for Joseph on account of him and heard that he possessed certain means. Now, Mormon Informant, you're always pretty darn accurate. I just remember reading something like that in the words being certain keys. And it may not have been from this exact thing. Certain keys having to do with magic. And if we look at magical language and we look at Masonic language and then we look in the Doctrine and Covenants and Organization of the Relief Society, we see so many Masonic terms and so in various magical terms written into LDS scripture. Incredible. And like I said, writing in the whole Seer Stone thing and everything into the Book of Mormon. Just a little too coincidental, isn't it? In other words, he writes the 19th century magic into the Book of Mormon and then uses it to verify what he's doing is okay in bringing forth the restored gospel. Okay, so Lucy Mack Smith said that Josiah Stowell came looking for Joseph, 150 miles, and they didn't have a car, by the way, on account of having heard that he possessed certain means by which he could discern things invisible to the natural eye. That's a quote from Joseph Smith's mother. He either had these abilities and could see below the earth, or he lied to get paid. Which do you prefer? Okay, so now he starts calling him names. Sorry, fam. I'll do my own research, but I won't take your word for it. I don't think so. You really like Bushman. Well, Bushman's very credible. And then he starts talking trash about D. Michael Quinn and Fawn Brody. And then he says Brody was debunked. Debunked? Just because Hugh Nibley talked trash about her doesn't mean she was debunked. And if he could find one or two things that he didn't think used certain criteria for ascertaining reliability by scholars in her book out of hundreds of things that she came up with in Mormon history, that doesn't discredit her. They like to try to find some little flaw. I didn't put a comma here, or your brother-in-law was gay, or something, and then they discredit everything you said. You know, and that's why Fawn Brody and Michael Quinn were probably excommunicated for gay-lesbian issues. Michael Quinn was a professor at BYU, had special access to the, vaults, maybe the First Presidency vault even. A scholar, indeed. He said things they didn't like. So did Fawn Brody. And she was the niece of President David O. McKay. So she was married with a family, but somewhere I'm sure I read that they decided she was a lesbian or something. But so that makes her a completely incredible source, right? Because she must be spiritually in the dark. Well, these aren't opinions. These are, everybody's got some opinion, but she laid down a heck of a lot of documented fact in her book, No Man Knows My History. D. Michael Quinn, who wrote, about the Mormon hierarchy and, early Mormonism, the magic world view, very factual. It's like Dan Fogel. And so he discredits him and starts trashing him here. Brody's work has been debunked. That's a bunch of garbage. And Quinn made a career out of being excommunicated. What does that mean? He was excommunicated. Okay? So were the September 6th, all these LDS scholars that were excommunicated for saying true things that the church didn't want out there. Okay, the September 6th. So clear. So it's pretty clear he's not in it for truth. No, it's not clear that. A slam journal. So he uses name calling again. One last question. Do I have to make the magic circles before I say the spells afterwards? Because I'm confused. Also, my broomstick isn't flying as high as I wanted it to. Okay, so he apparently can't use any factual information to refute anything. And of course, the Mormon Informant states that despite the fact these people have been excommunicated LDS.org essay writers approved by the First Presidency uses them as reliable sources to quote in the Gospel Topics essays. How about that? And then this guy just says, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Yeah, you could read them. I'm not going to read every word for it. Okay. If Quinn and Brody are so untrustworthy, why are they both cited as credible sources in the church's Gospel Topics essays? Could it be because being excommunicated for sexual preference has nothing to do with the quality of Quinn's research? Is it possible that Hugh Nibley's ad hominem debunking got a few things wrong? Yeah. And Nibley is a typical LDS apologist, like Dan Peterson, Scott Gordon. All they do is try to use character assassination and find some little thing and then try to discredit you. They don't. It's like on their 50 problems with the Mormon Church. I've gone over them, and there was one thing that I disagreed with. One thing. Well, you know what? Jesus only has to lie once to not be obeying his own law. Okay? And you can catch that right there in, E through chapter 3 where he tells, Brother Jared, this isn't one that they use, but it's one that on some of my videos. Tells him he's the first guy to ever see him, and no one ever had enough faith to see him. Moses chapter 7 verse 4, 1,000 years before, and the Lord appeared to me and talked to me face to face. Enoch. Doctrine and Covenants 107 verse 54. Everybody's gathered at Adam-on-Diamond for some reason, even after they've been living with the Lord for the last 240 years in Zion, and he appears to them, to all the patriarchs and every other righteous person. What we see here is these guys use a lot of mind games, associations, to try to make it sound like it's okay to use magic to write a book of scripture. Well, the Bible shows magic in it too, so I guess that's totally hypocritical as well. But, they say two wrongs don't make a right. And just trying to talk trash about somebody doesn't make them wrong, Kwaku. You failed to come up with factual information. Sorry if sharing a screenshot of a public conversation has hurt your feelings. Yep, that's right. Kwaku's upset that this conversation got aired even more, I suppose, huh? Well, I'm going to help out with that if I can, even though I don't quite have the view count. I do have factual content here, and so does Mormon Informant. And he backs up what he has to say with documented factual information, not a bunch of name-calling and the associations with Android and Apple, whatever, iPhones as digital seer stones to make it sound like it's totally cool for God to use a brown rock that was already been used by a magician. After his angel takes away your magic glasses, you just go back to your magic rock that you wrote into the Book of Mormon. Like your magic rocks that light the jaredite barges that stay underwater even though they're tight like into a dish and wouldn't allow air out or in, and therefore could not possibly stay under the water or anything else with them work. But that's another story, and I've done other videos. Nice try, guys. Much flattery. You're totally rad. Yeah. That makes it all true, It's totally normal. Guess what? People still practice magic. And brown rocks don't translate scriptures that are out in the woods in a log and are made of tin from the local factory, the local tin shop, and weighed 40 pounds instead of 200. Okay. I'm done with this guy for this video. I think we're going to have to find some more. This is the new thing for Mormon apologetics. Inoculate the young people with some guys that sound like hipsters and show some kind of credibility because they've been to school. but can't seem to use factual information to refute a Mormon scholar like Mormon Informant. Check his deal out, 50 Problems with the Mormon Church, and then go check out the details of many of those on mine, on the Dodger Game channel, where you find the Mormon Truth video library, and everything from Gordon Hinckley to the Book of Mormon and Book of Abraham's on there. Over 100 videos, and none from these guys. Get on out of here. Dodger Game, Mormon Truth, out.
Parentheses, and please don't forget to share this article. It may help more people than you know.